Elder Graham gave us a very wonderful introduction to our passage today. I almost felt like he was reading my sermon notes. I don't know where he is. There he is. But thank you for giving us that great summary of the book of Daniel. And when you read the story of Daniel and you look at the time that he lived, you can say that he lived in what could be described as a very tumultuous and turbulent time in history. Certainly for the nation of Judah, but also for all the nations in the ancient Near East during that time. Only a few hundred years before Daniel was born, the neighboring northern kingdom of Israel was completely destroyed by then the superpower, the Assyrian Empire. And the southern kingdom of Judah managed to avoid the same destructive fate only by the miraculous intervention of God during the reign of King Hezekiah. Eventually, however, the kingdom of Judah was also destroyed because of their sin. By now, the new superpower, the Babylonian Empire, under the king Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel, along with other Jews, were exiled to Babylon. Now, this mighty Babylonian Empire, however, did not last long, as we read in Daniel chapter 5. Again, as Elder Graham mentioned, the story of the writing in the wall during the reign of King Belshazzar, where the king of the Babylonians was slain that very night that Daniel interpreted the meaning of that writing on the wall that foretold of God's impending judgment on the kingdom of Babylon and how his kingdom would be given to the Medes and the Persians. And so here you have your homeland as Daniel destroyed and conquered. The temple by now is completely gone. You, along with many others, have been exiled and forcibly brought to Babylon. And here your name has been changed, so you're no longer called Daniel. Your identity has been altered. And on top of that, you are forced to serve the very king that destroyed your home. On top of that, you and your friends are facing constant danger and persecution because of your faith. As we read in the previous chapters of Daniel, the stories of the fiery furnace, Daniel himself is thrown into the lion's den. And just when you thought, you're kind of settling into this new reality called Babylon, a new world superpower takes over and completely upends the world as you know it. What a life. And in the midst of all this chaos and destruction and persecution, the question that I'm sure was on Daniel's and other Jewish people of his day, their minds, was the question of, where is God in all of this? Has God completely abandoned his people? What about the covenant that God made with their ancestors, with Abraham, with David? What happened to the promise that, Abraham's descendant and David's descendant would establish a kingdom? The kingdom is destroyed. Everything is gone. And there are all these other pagan superpowers that are taking over the entire world. The simple answer, of course, is no. God has not abandoned his people, nor has he forgotten about the covenant that he made with Abraham and David. Despite all that was happening in the world, God wanted Daniel and his people to know that he not only did not abandon them, but that there will be an incredibly glorious future yet to come. I don't know about you, but I really enjoy watching all kinds of different genres of movies, but I especially enjoy the suspense thriller genre. The kind of movie where you can't really predict the future. You don't really know what's going to happen at the end. And, especially if there's like a nice plot twist, it's especially very enjoyable. And I like watching those like suspense movies. But There are others that really don't like those kind of movies, and my wife is one of them. She does not do suspense well. She gets really like anxious, and then she's like, "Oh, I cannot contain this anxiety." And there are people that I know who would actually fast forward to the end of the movie to find out what happens. I don't know, there's someone you like that in here perhaps, right? To find out at least if the main character dies or not, because like, okay, at least he's not gonna die, because that's good. Now I can watch the movie in peace, kind of idea, right? And so they want to see what happens so that they don't have to be worried about the well-being of the main character throughout the movie. And the vision that God gives to Daniel is kind of like that, where for Daniel and others at that time, they're just filled with questions and anxiety, wondering what is going to happen here. Like, we don't understand. Like, the story is not making sense, God. I thought you gave us these promises. I thought you were in control. I thought there will be this future kingdom that you promised to us. What's going on? And as a way to reassure Daniel and others, God gives Daniel several dreams and visions, other things that are to come. He fast forwards history, so to speak, and allows Daniel to get a glimpse of what is still to come. And these visions are recorded in the second half of the book of Daniel. The first 6 chapters are kind of the narratives of the stories that we have looked at so far. And then beginning with chapter 7, we have the series of dreams and visions that is written down by Daniel. And the vision and the dream that is described for us in chapter 7 that we read today is kind of a sort of an overview of the entire history of the future world, with the subsequent chapters 8 to 12 kind of focusing on some of the key elements of that grand narrative that is given to us here in the 7th chapter. So again, in a way, God is letting us know how the story of the world will ultimately end, so that we can be rest assured and not be anxious, and be able to have hope and be comforted knowing that God does have a plan, and is a wonderful plan. And so, for the interest of time, we'll just quickly go through the main points of the vision and how it might apply to us today. So first, we have Daniel describing these 4 beasts that come out of the sea. The first one is described as a creature that's like a lion with wings of an eagle. And most biblical scholars agree that this beast represents Babylon, the first great kingdom. And interestingly enough, archaeologists have actually discovered pictures of these creatures that look like a lion with wings like an eagle that were actually painted on the walls of the city of Babylon. And so, in a way, this imagery, this symbol, it was the direct actual symbol that Babylonians themselves used to represent their kingdom. The second creature is described as a bear, like a bear that is eating something. It's eating some kaibi, right? It has these 3 ribs in its mouth. And again, most theologians and scholars agree that this creature represents the Medo-Persian Empire that came soon after Babylon, took over everything, and the 3 ribs in the mouth are often ascribed to the nations that the Persian Empire conquered in their conquest, mainly Babylon, Egypt, and a nation called Lydia that was located in present-day Turkey. These were the 3 main kind of nations that they conquered in their conquest. And then next we have a third creature that is described as kind of being like a leopard or a panther with 4 wings. And so it's interpreted as, a leopard, unlike a bear, which is kind of, slow and not really agile. In contrast, this creature, leopard, is very fast, is agile. And on top of that, it has wings, which means is even faster. It can fly and travel at a great speed. And historians and again, scholars agree that this represents the kingdom of Greece. And for those of you who are history buff, know about the conquest of Alexander the Great. Before the age became the age of 33, he conquered pretty much all of the known world at the time, stretching from Greece to present-day India. With incredible speed, the Greeks were able to conquer and capture territories like never seen before. Now, what's really interesting and fascinating is that Daniel describes this creature, this third creature that looks like a leopard, as having 4 heads. And maybe it's a coincidence, or maybe it's just another example of how incredibly accurate prophecies in the Bible are. The 4 heads, again, many people would ascribe to the 4 generals named Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. The 4 generals of Alexander, who, when Alexander unfortunately died at a young age, suddenly, most likely due to disease, these 4 generals basically carved up the territories and established their own kingdoms. And so we have this creature with 4 heads that soon took over the world. And then finally we come to the 4th beast, which is described not representing any animal that we're familiar with, but is described as being terrifying and frightening and very powerful. There's something very different about this one. It is also described as having 10 horns, and then it goes on to talk about a little horn that we'll get to shortly. And again, most scholars agree that this is Rome, the Roman Empire, that, of course, came after the Greek Empire, conquered everything, and its territory stretching all the way from Spain to the west to present-day Turkey and beyond to the east. Now, when you look at these creatures together, one thing that is common, of course, is that all of these 4 great beasts are animals of prey. They're carnivores, right? They're described as having, claws and sharp teeth. They're eating ribs, and what the commonality here is, these creatures that represent the various kingdoms of the earth is one of violence and oppression. When you look at history, history indeed is filled with wars and conquests, and one nation kept conquering the other nation and destroying and pillaging, and it's an ongoing cycle that was true back during the time of Daniel, as is true in modern history. But another commonality that we see here is that these beasts or these kingdoms do not last for a long time. Even when the final beast that is described as this ferocious and very frightening and very powerful, more powerful than the first 3, even that beast is described as being killed and destroyed in the fire. And the message here is quite clear. The message is that God has the final say, that God is ultimately in control. Even in the midst of the chaos, even in the midst of all the violence of one nation coming after the other, God has a plan that He reveals to Daniel and to us. In our passage in verse 13, this is what Daniel says in the midst of the vision. He says, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into His presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped Him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and His kingdom is one that will not be destroyed." Now, there has been a lot of debates, discussions amongst scholars, Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, of what does this mean? Who is this Son of Man? For us Christians, the answer is quite obvious. I mean, is it a coincidence that when we read the Gospels, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man? Now, what's even more fascinating, maybe this is a little bit of a coincidence, but I thought it was pretty fascinating. This section of the book of Daniel was not written in Hebrew. In fact, it was written in a language called Aramaic, which is kind of like a cousin to Hebrew. It's very similar, but slightly different. And it was the English of the ancient Middle East, if you will. It was like the common language that pretty much everyone spoke. And fast forward a few hundred years, Jesus himself spoke this language called Aramaic. And so even though the New Testament gospel is written in Greek, the language that Jesus would have spoke and preached and interacted with the people in his time was the same language that was used to write this portion of Daniel. And so when Jesus says, Son of Man, to refer to himself, he actually is saying the exact same word or the phrase that was written in this prophecy, Son of Man. I don't think it's coincidence. And I don't think Jesus was just simply saying, no, I'm a man. I believe that Jesus was telling his people, telling us, you know that vision that Daniel had? You know that being that looks like a man that came before this Ancient of Days, the one that existed through all of time, who was given authority, glory, and sovereign power? Well, guess what, guys? I am that man. I am the one who will come to bring this eternal kingdom. I am the one that is going to come with power, with authority, with glory, so that all nations and people of every language will worship. And this kingdom that Jesus brought when he came to this earth, and that he will finalize when he comes again, is the everlasting kingdom that will not pass away or be destroyed, through which God will ultimately fulfill the covenant promise that he made with Abraham and David. The message is very clear. Even though we might see in the world today the same kind of turmoil, violence, chaos, oppression that is human history and human kingdoms, God is still in perfect control and will one day bring about his kingdom that is beyond any human kingdom that was or is to come. So, brothers and sisters, let us take heart. There is nothing to fear, for God's eternal kingdom is coming. Wait with patience and hope. Seek his kingdom. Live with kingdom values as outlined in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. Be poor in spirit. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. Be merciful. Have a pure heart. And be willing to be persecuted because of righteousness. For these are the qualities of those who will inherit the kingdom of God. Brothers and sisters, there are so many things happening in our world today, especially with the pandemic. And maybe you are wondering, where is God in all of this? What's happening in our world? Why is this happening? Has God abandoned us? The answer is no. He is with us. He is preparing his kingdom, and his promises are true. Let us look forward to this kingdom, this glorious kingdom that John describes in the book of Revelation. The kingdom that will come, that is being prepared for us. And as the church, as the bride, eagerly waits for the groom, the Lamb of God, as we look forward to that great, amazing, wonderful banquet that will be held in this new kingdom. I pray that you will have courage, that you will have hope, that you will live without anxiety, knowing what the ending is. We know the answer. We know how it will unfold. Let us trust in this promise. Let's trust in the hope that God has given to us.